Have you ever asked yourself what really happens to the mind after death? Does it vanish along with the body, like a flame suddenly extinguished? Or does it remain trapped somewhere, repeating thoughts that refuse to be silenced? What if death is not the end, but simply an extension of what we already are? An endless stream of voices, doubts, memories, and desires. And what if true rest never comes? What if the silence we imagine is nothing but an illusion? How many times have you tried to shut your mind off and failed? How many nights have you laid awake begging for your thoughts to stop, only for them to keep circling, restless, unstoppable? Now imagine that state forever. This is exactly the disturbing idea Dostoevsky presents in Bobok. The narrator, a disenchanted and ironic man, wanders through the streets of St. Petersburg until he ends up in a cemetery. But instead of silence, he begins to hear voices, not from the living but from beneath the ground. Consciousnesses that refuse to die, still talking as if nothing has changed. And what do these voices say? Nothing profound. No celestial revelations, no vision of the beyond. Only petty confessions, trivial and absurd, adulteries, shady business deals, shallow vanities. Death has not brought nobility. It has only stripped away the masks, leaving human mediocrity exposed. As if Dostoevsky were whispering to us, our essence does not dissolve with decay. We remain what we always were, even beneath the earth. If this idea already unsettles you and sparks your curiosity, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and turn on the bell. Because this is only the first layer of a story that forces us to confront ourselves. So, what is consciousness? A divine spark that resists death? Or just an endless noise we can never escape? And if it is only noise, are we not already dead in life, trapped in an inner chatter that never ends? What is most unsettling in Bobok is not just that the dead keep talking, but what they choose to talk about. We might expect wisdom from beyond the grave or remorse or at least a moment of silence. But no, their voices echo with the same trivialities, the same pettiness, the same shallow desires that once consumed them in life. Think about that for a moment. If you were given one more chance to speak after death, what would you say? Would you try to confess your deepest sins? Would you cry out for forgiveness? Or would you cling to the same meaningless conversations that once filled your days? Dostoevsky paints a chilling picture. The body may decay, but the mind refuses to evolve. It lingers. It circles around its old habits, its hidden vices, its unhealed wounds. There is no transformation, no liberation, only repetition. The consciousness becomes like an echo chamber, a mirror reflecting the same image again and again. And doesn't that feel familiar? How often do we repeat the same thoughts in our daily lives, like a loop we cannot escape? How often do we relive arguments that are long over, regrets that cannot be undone, fears that were never real to begin with? It is as if Dostoevsky is holding up a mirror, not to the dead, but to us, the living. Because maybe the true question is not, what happens after death? Maybe the question is, what are we already doing with the time we have? If our consciousness survives beyond the grave, then it carries with it exactly what we cultivate now. And if what we cultivate is vanity, corruption, and endless chatter, then perhaps that is the eternity we inherit. What strikes us in Bobok is the absence of transcendence. Death in Dostoevsky's vision does not purify, does not elevate, does not awaken. It only reveals. It strips away the masks we wore in life and leaves us naked, with nothing but the raw truth of who we already were. And what do we see in that mirror? Not saints, not sages, but ordinary men and women clinging to gossip, to greed, to empty desires. It is grotesque, yes, but also strangely familiar. Because deep down, aren't we all haunted by the possibility that our lives might be made of the same smallness? Ask yourself, how much of your energy is spent on what truly matters? And how much is wasted on appearances, on chasing approval, on arguments that will never change a thing? What part of you would remain if tomorrow you were stripped of your body, your possessions, your reputation? What voice would still be speaking in the dark? This is where Bobok becomes more than just a strange story about talking corpses. It becomes a philosophy. It whispers that eternity is not some distant realm. It begins here and now inside our own thoughts. The consciousness you carry with you today is the same one that would follow you beyond the grave. And so the real terror is not the idea of death. The real terror is recognizing that we may already be living in our eternity. An eternity shaped not by gods or demons, but by the habits of our own restless minds. What if the greatest prison is not built of stone and iron, but of thought? In Bobok, the cemetery becomes a metaphor for this prison. The bodies are buried, yes, but the voices remain. And these voices cannot escape themselves. They are trapped, circling the same desires, the same regrets, the same unfinished sentences. Isn't that what happens to us while alive? How many times do you return to the same memory, the same failure, the same conversation you wish had ended differently? We think of freedom as a physical state, but what about the freedom of the mind? If our thoughts are chains, does it matter whether we are alive or dead? Dostoevsky is daring us to face this uncomfortable truth. Death does not magically solve the riddle of existence. It does not erase our restlessness. It only exposes the reality that was already there, that our consciousness may never stop speaking. And this is where the story becomes more than a grotesque comedy. It becomes a mirror of modern life. We live surrounded by noise, external noise, yes, but also internal. Notifications, conversations, endless debates, and beneath it all, the ceaseless voice of our own minds, always speaking, never silent. So here is the question Dostoevsky leaves hanging in the air. If we cannot master our own consciousness now, while we breathe, what hope do we have for silence after death? There is something haunting in the way Dostoevsky describes these voices. They do not grow wiser with death. They do not soften with time. They simply persist, like an echo that refuses to fade. And doesn't that sound strangely familiar? How many of us live our lives as if on repeat, thinking the same thoughts day after day, replaying the same fears, chasing the same desires? What if this loop is not just a habit of the living, but the very nature of consciousness itself? Think about it. If you are unable to silence your mind now, what makes you believe death will do it for you? If you are restless in life, what guarantee is there of peace in eternity? Perhaps Dostoevsky is not speaking about the dead at all. Perhaps he is warning us about the living, about how easily we become trapped in the noise of our own thoughts. The dead in Bobok are only an extreme reflection of what we already experience every day. A consciousness that never rests, never releases, never lets go. And here lies the paradox. We long for freedom, yet we rarely practice it where it matters most, inside the mind. We long for silence, yet we feed the chatter with distractions, with vanity, with endless repetition. So maybe Dostoevsky's strange little tale is not about ghosts, but about us, about the prison we carry within. So the question becomes, is it possible to break free from this echo? Or is the mind condemned to speak forever, alive or dead? What makes Bobok so powerful is not the grotesque image of corpses whispering in their graves. It is the recognition that those voices are not foreign. They are our own. Their endless chatter mirrors the same restlessness that fills our daily lives. The story lingers because it feels less like a fantasy and more like a revelation of something we already know but refuse to face. Think about how much of your day is filled with noise. Not the noise of traffic, not the sound of machines, but the noise inside, the constant rehearsals of what you should have said, the arguments you replay again and again, the fears that sneak in during the quiet moments, the endless scroll of worries, regrets, desires. If silence is impossible for us in life, why should we expect it in death? And here lies Dostoevsky's genius. He takes what we all experience, this inner noise, and stretches it into eternity. He forces us to confront a disturbing possibility. Maybe the afterlife is not about reward or punishment, but simply continuation. Not transformation, not redemption. Just more of the same. The chatter never ends. The loop never breaks, but isn't that already a form of judgment? Not by God, not by devils, but by ourselves. Imagine carrying into eternity the very habits of thought you nurture right now. If you cultivate bitterness, what will echo after death is bitterness. If you feed envy, envy will remain. If your mind is restless, restless it will stay. What survives the grave is not some purified essence, but the exact shape of your consciousness as it is today. This is why Bobok unsettles us so deeply, because it asks a question most of us avoid. What are we training our minds to become? Every thought, every obsession, every repeated pattern is a seed. And if Dostoevsky is right, those seeds do not die with the body, they bloom in eternity. So ask yourself now, what would your eternity sound like if it began this very moment? Dostoevsky does not frighten us with demons or with visions of fire. He frightens us with something far more intimate. The thought that eternity may simply be the endless continuation of ourselves. And that raises a disturbing question. If we are condemned to carry our consciousness forever, then what kind of eternity are we preparing right now? Pause for a moment. Listen to the stream of thoughts inside your head. Are they kind? Are they wise? Are they free? Or are they anxious, bitter, restless? If death only reveals what is already there, then every thought becomes a rehearsal for eternity. This is the philosophy hidden inside Bobok, that heaven and hell are not places waiting for us after death. They are states of mind built here in life moment by moment. And when the body falls away, only the state remains. So imagine this. A man dies clinging to pride. His body returns to dust, but the pride does not die. It lingers, echoing in the silence. Another dies with envy in his heart. The body is gone, but the envy remains, burning, repeating, circling without end. Dostoevsky forces us to see what we would rather deny, that the voice inside us never stops, that it is shaping us even now, and that one day, it may be all that is left of us. So the question is not simply, what happens after death? The question is, what kind of eternity am I creating through the life I live today? What Dostoevsky reveals in Bobok is not the horror of the grave. It is the horror of continuity, the realization that nothing changes unless we change it now. We often comfort ourselves with the idea that death will bring release, that the suffering will end, that the noise will fade. But what if death does not erase the self? What if it simply unmasks it? What if eternity is nothing more than the truth of who we are, carried forward without disguise? Think about it. We spend our lives building identities, reputations, masks. We want the world to see a polished version of ourselves. But beneath that surface, the restless mind continues. The envy, the pride, the endless comparisons. And in Bobok, Dostoevsky tears away the mask. The dead are stripped bare, and what remains is not greatness, but trivial chatter. And doesn't that echo our own lives? So much of our energy is poured into appearances, into defending the image of who we think we are. But what survives us is not the mask, it is the voice beneath it. The voice that never stops speaking, even when the world is silent. So here is the challenge. If eternity is built from the contents of our consciousness, then every thought is a brick, every emotion is a foundation, and we are each day constructing the house in which we may dwell forever. Ask yourself, what kind of house are you building? Prison of restless echoes, or a sanctuary of silence? Dostoevsky's tale may sound grotesque, even absurd, but the deeper you listen, the more it feels like prophecy. He is not writing about corpses in a cemetery. He is writing about us, about the way we live, about the voices we refuse to silence. Look around at the modern world. We are surrounded by chatter, endless conversations, opinions, confessions, noise without rest. We escape into distractions, into screens, into constant motion. But when all is quiet, what remains? The same restless mind, the same inner voice, the same echo that Dostoevsky described more than a century ago. And here lies the warning. If we cannot face silence now while alive, then silence will never come, not even in death. We will carry with us the weight of our habits, our obsessions, our inner noise, and that will be our eternity. But what if eternity is not a distant place? What if it is already here? What if you are living it now, every time you let your mind circle endlessly? Every time you are trapped in bitterness, envy, or regret? Heaven and hell are not afterlife destinations. They are states of consciousness, and they begin the moment you listen to the voice inside your head. So ask yourself this: if your eternity is already unfolding in the thoughts you feed today, what future are you creating for yourself? So where does this leave us? If Bobok teaches us anything, It is that death does not erase the voice inside. It does not free us from ourselves. It only unmasks what was already there. That is why the real question is not, what happens when I die? The real question is, what am I doing with my consciousness while I live? Every thought you choose, every emotion you repeat, every pattern you feed, is shaping the eternity you may carry beyond the grave. And here is the uncomfortable truth. You do not have to wait for death to experience this eternity. You are living it right now. Your mind is your heaven. Your mind is your hell. And the voice that speaks when all else is silent is the voice you will live with forever. If this reflection stirred something in you, if it made you question the noise within, then subscribe, leave a like, and share this journey with others. Because together we can go deeper into the truths that Dostoevsky, Jung, and so many others tried to unveil. And remember this final thought: silence will not come from the grave. Silence must be cultivated here now, while you still breathe, because in the end, the voice you hear when the world is quiet is the voice that eternity will echo back to you.